Good afternoon, everybody, and happy first day of spring. I didn't even realize that when I got up this morning. I'm like, oh my goodness, it's the 21st. Let's put some spring into our step. So, really excited to be here with our friends from Hudu, Ken, and Daniel. Really talking about something near and dear to both of our hearts, which is documentation. But without further ado, hey, Ken, why don't you come on up, say hello, tell us a little bit about yourself and, what you got going on over there.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ken Moten. I'm the Security and Compliance Manager at Hudu. I have about 15 years experience in information security. I've been continuing my journey with Hudu, just really making sure that we dot our I's and cross our T's as far as a comprehensive information security program and meeting compliance with multiple regulations. So thank you guys for joining, and I'm happy to be with you all today.
Tim, I think you're muted there.
I am, which is great because we've already gotten that whole Tim's on mute thing out of the way. This is definitely not my first time. Daniel, when you come up, I'll make sure we have your little cool banner down the bottom as well. I should have done that with Ken, but I'm trying to get all the things set up. Anyways, hey, good afternoon, people. Tim Golden, CEO and founder of Compliance Scorecard, where we help MSPs have the risk conversation with your customers using our Compliance Scorecard. Excited to have Ken and Daniel here today talking about, as I said earlier, all things documentation. And I'm going to do a little anecdote on the side here. At Compliance Scorecard, we are firm believers of better together, right? Working side by side with MSP vendors, much like our friends here at Hudu, to be able to work together, right? We had that AMA. We talked a little bit about why are you two, aren't you both documentations? But we're vastly different documentation. And this, at least as part of my heart and what we want to be able to bring here at Compliance Scorecard, is having vendors work together to ultimately help the MSP and the small businesses that they work with. All too often we see vendors working in silos. And the more that we can all work better together and have some data sharing, the more efficient MSPs will become, the better their end customers will be protected, defended, and secured. I know I went on a little bit of a ramble there, but to us, working together with companies like Hudu and teams like that are really important to us. So I'm so excited to have the team here. Thank you so much for joining us. All right, Daniel, you're up, my friend.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Thanks for the introduction. Glad to be here and, be talking with you today. Somebody that's very, inapt with everything compliance in the industry and tying that in with documentation. And so my role here is really just to kind of keep the conversation flowing, make sure that we get the questions answered. We did host a AMA 2 weeks ago, which I will go ahead and link in the comments. Tim gave some very insightful answers during that AMA period. And so I'll link that in there. If you haven't had a chance to check it out yet, please feel free to do so. And yeah, that being said, we can go ahead and hop right into everything that we kind of want to touch on, and we'll get started. There you go, Tim. See, Rick, I hope
sorry, Rick. That time I wasn't on mute. I was literally just, being the playful guy that I normally am. But yes, this time I'm off mute, at least for the moment.
There you go. So yeah, I'd love to just get the conversation started today with really starting off with you, Tim. How, in your experience, can you get your company to buy into compliance? And that being said, how can you really integrate compliance into your daily operations and make it easy for your staff to follow?
Yeah, that's a really great question. As an MSP, right, as a former MSP, we were forced into it because of the government work that we were doing. And so we didn't really have a choice. All of our government contracts said, you will follow NIST 853, you will do this work. And so as we continued to build out that practice around our government contracts, we didn't have a choice. But once we started to niche into non-government and niche into commercial customers, we wanted to make sure that the work that we were already really good at, we went after, for example, healthcare, biotech. Biotech was really big for us. But I get it. There's a lot of MSPs that are, I don't want to use the word generalist, but might not have a very specific niche. So how do you as an MSP first get your own house in order and then your customers? Well, there's a great thing like GTIA, right? The Global Technology Industry Association, where they have this trust mark program where you can get your house in order there. And even if you're not a GTIA member, starting by getting your own house in order, CIS, FTC safeguards, there's a whole process of figuring out what framework do I start to align to. And by getting your own house in order, you're going to start to do things like build defensibility, understand where your own business risks are, and being able to build that practice now that you've learned how to do the work on yourself, and then bring that forward to your customers. There's a whole process of figuring that out. Obviously, we can help you with that and maybe some work alongside with Ken over there at Hudu. But I would say get your own house in order. At a minimum, look at cyber liability insurance, especially for yourself. You know what those questionnaires are asking because you're filling them out. Start there and start to build your own culture around compliance, around risk, and around defensibility.
Great points there, Tim. I totally agree. I mean, you have to practice what you preach, and so I do think starting with yourself, getting your own house order, that is, the perfect way to get an understanding of some of these things, and it also, just gets you one step closer to being able to help your clients achieve some of those same results that you've done internally. So, great points.
Yeah, so I'm curious, Ken, and not to put you guys on the spot, but tell me a little bit about your background. What have you done in security and compliance manager there? Tell me a little bit about not just your background, but what Hudu is considering as well.
Hudu is really, wanting to, take what we do to the next level. Currently, we're SOC 2 compliant, and we've put in the foundations for everything we need for our ISO 27001 and 27701 compliance frameworks. So we're just waiting to do our external audit to certify for those. We also put in comprehensive data privacy programs, addressing GDPR, U.S. state and local privacy laws as well. And so with Hudu, we just want to make sure that we can serve our customers regardless of location, in a way that corresponds with whatever kind of local requirements that they have. And from there, we're in the process of maturing as well. So we're starting with compliance, and then we're just looking at our overall environment and just trying to understand, hey, where could we have gaps and where can we increase our maturity, in order to, make sure that, we have adequate controls in place to safeguard our customers' data.
Love that. If only there was a company that could help you. I'm kidding. Yeah, we do see a lot of vendors like, I'm not going to get into the whole SOC 2 versus ISO versus bad audits. If you've seen LinkedIn in the last couple of months around SOC 2 and ISO, all those things, it's just, there's a lot of stuff anyways. But the key point is getting your own house in order, right? Like, we're working towards our SOC 2. We're working towards our ISO. We're actually starting to consider CMMC. My MSP back in the day was FedRAMP Moderate. And if you know anything about that, NIST 853 and the number of controls we had to deal with. So, we have that experience, but really it's building that customer trust. It's, getting your own house in order, making sure, as you said, Ken, protecting that data understanding where that data is and the flows around that. It's really important that not just we as vendors, but also our MSPs as well, and helping them on that compliance journey. Because we hear a lot, it's big, it's scary, I don't know, like I just want to click buttons. And the fact of the matter is it doesn't actually have to be scary. It just has to be done.
100%.
So, Ken, as you've gone through your SOC 2 and prep in the ISO world, what was one of the biggest challenges that you all have faced over there?
Let's see, we've come a long way. Initially, it was, having all of the pieces of a mature program in place to be able to manage and to measure and manage our performance on an ongoing basis prior to the external audits. And I think, as you know, documentation was a very big key to that, because not only did we have to have our processes, our policies documented what we're going to do, but we needed to have processes developed and written out so that our employees have something to measure against. There's a defined process to meet a particular control, and that's their target. So they know, hey, here it is in writing, do these steps, and you're going to generally be compliant. And so really that having that documentation and having those processes in place, it allowed us to be very consistent and efficient with meeting our compliance requirements. So I think that was a big thing that, it ends up taking our SOC 2 times probably is cut in half, over the last year, 2 audits, just because, we're defined and we're sticking to that, and we're checking in on that on a periodic basis ourselves. So when it comes to the audit, we produce the evidence of what we're doing, and, we have assurance that we are in compliance with our regulations.
Yeah. Well, that's why we're here, right? Talking about documentation, right? I live and breathe in the world. If it's not written down, it doesn't exist, but you're still held accountable. When we received the government contract back in 2006 or 7 or whatever the hell it was, and it was like, you will adhere to NIST 853. And we actually I dug through looking at the controls, looking at what the requirements were. And what I realized was we were actually doing way more than we thought, but none of it was written down. None of it existed. And and by the way, back in those days, you couldn't Google incident response plan or password policy or Chat GPT, a template for me. Like, none of that crap existed. So we had to write all that stuff from scratch and then maintain it. I hate to say it, you MSPs nowadays got it easy, because you can just Chat GPT, Google your way through a baseline document as a jumping off point. Maybe not 100%, but as a jumping off point. So y'all got it easy nowadays. Kidding.
Yes, for sure. And, I found too, sometimes when you don't have thorough documentation, you just leave the door wide open to the auditor's interpretation. So, if you have a documentation, if you have a document in the process, then the auditor is going to he's going to audit that documented process that you have detailed out. But if you don't have that, then, you're not focusing their efforts into, what you want them to look at. And you just give them the liberty to kind of roam, and it just makes it all cumbersome. And so again, it's all about that document, that evidence, to be able to substantiate the good security practices that you're doing. Because like you said, in a lot of cases, companies are doing what they need to do, they just can't prove it. And that sometimes becomes the challenge. And so to avoid that pitfall, it's imperative just to have good documentation all over the place to support your security and compliance efforts.
Yeah, I love that, right? Surprisingly, MSPs probably are doing a lot of the things. The challenge is we don't write the crap down like we should. And this affects your entire business model as an MSP. not just your compliance. I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant here. So, as an MSP, you have all this institutional knowledge across all the different people in your organization, right? Maybe you have somebody that's your firewall expert. Maybe you have somebody that's your M365 expert. And that knowledge lives in their brain. And by not writing it down, I'm now forced to like, hey, you're my Microsoft guy. You can't take a vacation because what if something goes down? Or, oh my gosh, the firewall person, like every firewall across the entire, network needs to be dealt with. Won't pick on some of those CVEs we've seen in the last couple of weeks. But the reality is that even if you start to write internal documentation down at the highest level, I'm not talking, building Wikipedia. I'm not talking building, Encyclopedia Britannica, but just start to write down some of the basic things that not only you do over and over, and, Hudu can certainly help with some of those SOPs and checklists and that kind of stuff, but start writing the stuff down, because as you do that, and as you involve your team in that, now you're spreading that institutional knowledge across your entire organization. You're now teaching and training and helping grow the rest of your organization. And you have a centralized repository of where do I find stuff and how do I do shit? So my big, takeaway around, this compliance conversation, it's not even compliance. It's more on start writing stuff down and share that knowledge amongst your team at a minimum. For God's sakes, take an hour and write at least one thing a week. Whether you do that in Word or Hudu or Compliance Scorecard or pen and paper, just start writing some shit down.
For sure. I mean, especially specific to MSPs, when we're talking about managing IT operations at scale, I mean, it can get very, very complicated and cumbersome without the proper documentation in place. And that's sort of, whose bread and butter is to be able to enable that. But, not necessarily just Hudu, just, the purpose of documentation as well. It allows you to scale. And also, I would almost consider, if you have isolated pockets of knowledge within your organization, that could be looked at as a business continuity issue. I mean, instead of a disaster that's causing the critical process going down, it could, without proper documentation, without proper knowledge sharing within an organization, something as small as an individual being sick today could end up stopping critical processes. And so it's very imperative just, to have your playbook, have your documentation in place to enable the smooth operation of your organization or the organizations that you support.
I love that. Right. And so, well, I posted this in the chat, but anyways, I'm just going to say it. So not only does it allow for that sharing and that knowledge and knowledge transfer, but it does something else for your MSP. And this is what I learned. It helps be proactive. It helps, but I love to use that acronym, shift left, be prepared, hate to throw in the Boy Scouts or whatever, but it helps that proactive enablement of your team so that you're not always a firefighter, but you're Smokey the Bear. That only you can prevent forest fires, right? That proactive approach. I know we're going to get into another question here in a few minutes, but Ken, have you experienced any of that proactivity as well?
Yes, of course. It's even, from the standpoint of, having your documentation or even developing your documentation, it causes you to have to stand back and look at what you're doing versus what you're required to do. So at that point in time, when you're developing your documentation, you're taking a holistic look at, your requirements and you're making sure, hey, that, what we're doing, it addresses all of these requirements. And then you're also is giving you the time to think through how can we do this better? And so, I mean, again, though, these are all things that happen before an audit, before an incident, and it just gives you that opportunity, as you mentioned, to kind of shift left and get, the people with knowledge at the table and ready to, just work through issues and document those issues and ultimately optimize your operations.
Yeah, it's great. And well, there's a whole nother can here too. The big lesson that I learned, I came in dealing with all of this, looking at the frameworks, looking at the controls, looking at oh my crap, oh my God, I gotta write things down. And then the thing that hit me smack dab in the face was I never took time to explain the why. I just wanted to click buttons, lock people out, force multiple passwords, delete stuff, and, do all the technical things that us MSPs are really good at, which then in turn made people really angry. They couldn't do their job. And I didn't take the time to sit with them, especially the executive leadership top-down approach of understanding why we're doing this. So it's always great to make sure you're writing these things down, but being able to have that buy-in across the entire organization, right? Why does Johnny Janitor really give a crap about a password policy? Well, Johnny Janitor wants to get his email. And if Johnny Janitor's password is trash can, well, by not having a password policy, and he can make that password trash can, now we're opened ourselves up. But if I sit down with Johnny Janitor and I have that conversation and I'm like, hey, your password can't be Oscar the Grouch. And by the way, not only is this applying for you at work, but I bet your bank account probably says Big Bird or Oscar the Grouch or trash can. You probably should change them at home too. Once I started to have that why conversation, not only did it protect the business and the work that we were doing and get the buy-in, but it allowed the rest of the staff and the employees to think, I should probably do this at home, and I should probably have a conversation with my family, right? And I should be able to not just make it part of work told me to do this thing. No. I want to be able to change my own personal habits and cultures and things around now that I understand why we're doing it.
100%.
Yeah. So Daniel, you had something that you wanted to bring up. Let me pop you up here real quick.
Yeah, sounds great. And first off, thank you both. I think what you've been talking about and really the underlying message of building a culture of compliance and how you can utilize documentation to do so is something that's very important and really something that I think is going to be extremely helpful to a lot of MSPs out there. So thank you for kind of touching on that throughout this webinar so far. Now, the question I have is, Tim, can you talk a little bit about what an MSP should do to learn about compliance that they need to worry about? Obviously, there are a million different compliance requirements. But for example, if I'm a new MSP, or maybe I've been an MSP for a while, but I want to go after a new market, where do I really start?
That's a really great question, right? And honestly, hold on, let me make sure I'm doing this thing right. Hold on. So for your very first point, do you know who you're talking to? Because I can certainly talk about compliance all day long and probably bore the crap out of the audience for the most part. So talk a little about it. I'll try to be concise. When I think about where does an MSP start, what are the requirements, all that fun stuff. Here's the thing. The single most important thing you can do in your MSP is have a champion. Pick a person. That person doesn't have to be your level 75 master, PhD technician, by the way. The person probably needs to have some good project management skills, some good negotiation skills, and some capacity to keep people, moving forward in the process. So for those business leaders, for those MSPs that are listening here, for those that might be just the technician and listening here, but are interested in getting your own house in order, regardless of where you are in that pecking order in the MSP, either go to the boss, or if you are the boss, pick a human, have a champion, empower them, give them the time and the accountability, responsibility, and the tools and technologies that they need to be successful. Allow them to take an hour a week. You don't have to spend 40 hours a week. We already do that putting out fires. Remember, be Smokey the Bear, right? Pick a human, allow them to do the work, pay them to do the work, give them the time to do the work. That is probably the single most important thing that we stress here at Compliance Scorecard is no tool is going to click a box and make it happen. You need the person, the champion, and empower them to be accountable, have the authority, and given the time and energy to go do the work. All right, off my soapbox. Ken, would you add anything to that as far as how does an MSP start?
How do you start? I mean, there's a lot of frameworks out there that can give you that baseline. Cyber hygiene is where you want to start, and so you want to make sure you're getting the basics. So there's the CIS critical controls, or it used to be the top 20. I think they may have changed it now.
Yeah,
but I think, they call that cyber hygiene. It's going to get you like 85% of the threats. It's going to help you mitigate those. So, I mean, once you got your cyber hygiene in place, you can, maybe assist, and you can start looking at other frameworks that'll give you a baseline set of controls that will put you, close to compliant with a lot of different regulatory requirements. So if you look at ISO 27001 and 27701, that's information security management system, and that's also a privacy management system. So with those two frameworks together right there, you're going to cover, you're going to have a lot of the things in place for GDPR, for U.S. data privacy. It's going to require you to implement some privacy by design aspects. So, I mean, I think those are things that you can do. If you're concerned about, the various different regulatory requirements out there, you can pick a foundational framework, move forward with it, and then, evolve it and tailor it towards the specifics as you mature. And I think that'll get you to a good place.
I can't. Another lesson learned that's taken me a long time, right? So, as a compliance guy, as a security guy, as a technologist, as a guy that loves clicking ones and zeros, I too go right to the framework, right to the list of controls, right to the what buttons can I click? And, much like you were saying, Ken, CIS or this or that or this, like, I agree that us technical geeks want to go and buy a tool, click on buttons and start doing things. But having a plan, right? Whether it's the CIS controls, I might even back that down into start with cyber liability, right? Cyber liability insurance, like multi-factor everywhere, period. I can't believe it's, 2025. We're still talking about multi-factor, damn it. Multi-factor everywhere. Backups. I mean, backups, like who the hell's not doing backups nowadays? Conducting an assessment, having some baseline policies and procedures, discovering vulnerabilities, right? And dealing with vulnerabilities. Oh, and security awareness training. Yeah. Phishing testing, right? There's probably 6 or 8. And well, there's in our sort of roadmap for cyber liability insurance framework is 8 things, but I bet you're probably already doing some of these. You just probably don't have it solidified. So whether you pick NIST 853 with all, 1,029 controls, you pick CIS with those controls, or you start with the basics of even cyber hygiene, as Ken said. These are good things to do. Have some backups, have some multi-factor, have some training, start small, right? Our good friends at Empath, that's why they picked the elephant, because eat it one little bite at a time. So we're about the halfway mark here. I know we had a couple of other questions. Daniel, maybe you want to just really briefly touch on the AMA that we had real quick. I'll pull that up so people can see that.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. So yeah, just real quick, just to kind of highlight our partnership with Compliance Scorecard and with Tim and what we've kind of done so far is 2 weeks ago, we hosted an AMA with Tim on Hudu subreddit, and Tim has that link there, so you can kind of go take a look at that. I also linked it in the comments section of this webinar today. And we got a bunch of questions come in that were really great to hear Tim's insight on. Again, really, in my opinion, the bottom line is fostering the culture of compliance inside of your MSP and kind of how you can do that, what requirements you have. And that's actually, again, feel free to check out that AMA. Tim's responses are all laid out there for you. But that's kind of where I wanted to go next with this as well. And we've touched on this throughout this webinar of
what the heck is that? Wrong banner, dumbass. Why didn't you tell me that?
No worries at all.
Yeah,
we've talked a lot about that culture of documentation and the culture of compliance. And I think for, Tim and Ken, you two, obviously, this is your role. You are very good with, compliance isn't just a box checker, right? You foster that culture. The biggest thing I think that, maybe some companies can struggle with is how do you really create that company mindset that compliance isn't a box checker, but really something that can foster company growth and create revenue for your business. And that's kind of where I want to take this conversation next. So Tim, if you want to kick that off there, that would be great.
I'm sorry. Did you say boxer checker?
that is exactly what I said.
Did you say boxer checker? By the way, those are on order, hopefully in time for PAX 8 Beyond, if not sooner. And yes, I got nailed with tariffs too. Damn it. Like, we're not going political all here, but here's the thing specifically around GRC and the state of it. And at least in, sort of my narrow MSP view right now is, what we hear and what we see, they started to, like, it's coming. They're, a lot of MSPs are getting it, like it's here. I think that the most exciting part, well, before getting into that, like, it's still, they're wanting a checkbox exercise. They want to have a tool, get all the green lights and be done. And I get it, right? I think part of that is because we're just so damn busy putting out fires, right? Ken, we just talked about this, right? You spend time, and maybe there's a stat, for every hour you spend on left of boom, writing documentation, getting your stuff together and being proactive, there has to be a stat that says for every hour left of boom, you're going to save 10 on right of boom, on when the shit hits the fan. Now, maybe there is, maybe there isn't, but there is probably some kind of stat around that that's like, I know that for us at our MSP, as we got busier and we started to do that documentation, our ticket count went down, right? And if our ticket count went down, then that meant we were more efficient. We were answering less things. And, back to Daniel's original question here a few minutes ago, which is building that culture. Right? And go back to Johnny Janitor and his password of Oscar the Grouch. Now that he understood it, now that we had buy-in, back in the days when you used to change your password every 90 days, blah, 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 like back in those days, when he was prompted to change his password, he didn't have to complain or run or whatever and put a ticket and waste our time and blah, 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 like do it. Like he just knew, like, oh, this is why I do this. And so it built that culture of, security first mindset. Let me tell you, it's not easy. I'm literally working through some things like, hacking uncertainty and how to bring that message, internally of dealing with that uncertainty and dealing with that, building a culture of good cyber hygiene. I feel like I'm dominating the conversation. I'm just going to shut up. I'm going to pull Ken up on screen and let Ken talk.
All right. I mean, let's see. To build the culture, well, first of all, it definitely starts at the top. I think, most leaders now understand that they have to follow a couple principles when it comes to governing their organization, due process and due diligence. From a security perspective, in order to avoid liability, you need to know what needs to be done to secure your business, and you need to make sure you're doing it. If not, especially if you're a publicly traded company, you're opening yourself up to liability if there was a breach. Therefore, there is the need to manage your security, your security. From there, if there's a mandate from leadership, obviously that's going to trickle down to every single person in the organization. So it definitely starts at the top. As an MSP, security is how you gain the trust of your customers. Security, compliance, certifications, things of that nature. It's how you demonstrate your ability to operate under certain regulatory requirements or in certain jurisdictions. So without that, you're excluding yourself from a lot of different markets. I mean, almost daily, we get customers who are considering our product, and the first thing they ask us is, what kind of security programs do you have? We go through a lot of third-party vendor reviews. And so we like to be forward thinking. So we're answering those questions. We have a program in place. So when somebody inquires about what Hudu does, and I'm sure any MSP, when somebody inquires about that, you already have your program, your processes, your policy. You already have that in place, and you can demonstrate that by giving them a report or letting them see your policies and the things that you're doing. To get down to the culture, the people, I really like to make sure that everybody has skin in the game, because all it takes is one person to drop the ball and the bad guy's in the door, and so it's everybody's responsibility. Security awareness training and things of that nature, of course, reinforces that. But also, I like them to be able to come to the table. I mean, from as the compliance guy, I know the regulations, but your SMEs, they know their job. And so compliance always comes at a cost. Security comes at a cost. Sometimes that cost is financial. Sometimes it's more, just time. You might be making somebody's job a little more cumbersome. So I always have that conversation with my SMEs. I say, hey, we have to comply with this new regulation that has a requirement that directly affects you and your job. This is our end state. We have to be secure. What are your thoughts on that? How can we develop, a process, or what can we do together to make sure that we're compliant with this? So I'm not coming in telling them, hey, we need to do this, we need to do that. It's a joint decision where possible, because again, they have to live with the new control. They have to operate in this new environment with new restrictions on what they can do. But also, but it also opens doors from a technological perspective as well, because there's also different tools and things that can make their job more efficient overall. So I like to involve, everyone in the decisions that directly affect their role or their department where possible, to help, reinforce that culture of security and compliance is everyone's responsibility.
Yeah, you make a really lot of good points. It's everybody's responsibility. Again, back to Johnny Janitor, right? Yeah. When I think about, who within an organization as an MSP that I'm working with, starting at that top and working your way down through, is there a component of either security or compliance that doesn't apply to somebody? I don't think so, right? Even if I never touch a computer, for example, right? Even if like my job at company X, and I never touch a computer, well, first and foremost, physical security. What if I left the door unlocked? What if I dropped my badge or card in the Walmart parking lot, right? Just like you wouldn't at home, leave your car running with the windows down and a pile of cash on the front seat and go to bed. Like, just because you don't touch a computer doesn't mean that you are not necessarily involved, right? So, but yeah, I think you are right, right on there, Ken, with everybody's responsibility in getting that buy-in from top down, whether you touch a computer or not. And then how do I, as an MSP, explain that to my customer? Analogies. You know me, I like to talk in analogies. I like to be able to relate it to that company's business, right? Talking to them in their words and in their terms. This is why we talk a lot about niching and having an ideal customer profile and understanding the words that they use, right? I was invited into a conversation a couple of weeks ago with one of our MSPs who's, trying to bring the service to a customer, and they're an architectural firm. So because I was invited, it was a sales call. Like, what did I do? I started Googling, what are words architectural firms use when they're talking about stuff, so that I could try to speak in their words and in their vernacular so that I could make things relatable to them. And again, you all got it easy with the GPTs out there these days. You can literally go, tell me how to talk to a blank company and make that part of your, not just your sales pitch, but speaking in words they understand. So, Daniel, you have some more thing. You want me to pop you up with that one last question?
Yeah, go for it. Thanks, guys. That's great. So yeah, the thing that I think I'm also really curious about, and I'm sure many MSPs are, is obviously, like I mentioned earlier, there are millions of compliance, protocols and everything in the industry right now. And I'm really curious to pick both of your brains on how you kind of think that the compliance industry in the MSP industry is going to evolve over the next 1, 3, 5 years. And just kind of, as obviously we're getting into a, day and age now where just everything is, more and more and more, you need that security behind things and you need to be compliant within your company to specific items. I really just want to, I'm just curious about how both of you think that this is going to evolve and how MSPs can really stay on top of it.
I love this question. Ken, do you want to go first?
Sure. For MSPs, I think over the next 3 to 5 years, they're just going to see more and more requirements. Specifically, they're going to be, more and more jurisdictions are going to be coming out with data protection laws. We've been bombarded with several over the last few years. I think that will continue. And I think also, as far as different industries, I think there will be more industry specific guidance and compliance requirements out there. So for an MSP, the broader your operations, if you're a global company, if you support global clients across multiple industries, you're looking at managing a lot of requirements. And so again, organization, documentation, transferring of knowledge will be very important to manage that kind of program, at scale to meet compliance for, a large number of geographically dispersed customers. And so I think those are a couple of the big challenges I see coming down in the future, as well as requirements upon continuous compliance. In the past, it was, you got a spot check audit once a year, and then maybe looking at samples, but it seems like automation and continuous compliance is sort of being built in to a lot of these frameworks now. And so that'll be, something that MSPs have to start thinking towards and through, that they may be asked to be able to demonstrate compliance, almost real time, or, at least, more frequently than the traditional 1 year assessment, or external audit. So those are some of the big things that I see coming down the pipeline.
That's a really great response. And, I get this question all the time. Yeah. Hold on, let me just make sure I have it up here. Where do we see the industry in the next 3 to 5 years? And I could probably take this a lot of different directions. So first and foremost, governance, risk, compliance, risk conversations, checklists, all of that stuff. First and foremost, it's not going away. If CMMC and any of that is, or again, let's leave the political, government, whatever, out of the conversation. If CMMC is any indication, my crystal ball, and I've seen this firsthand, is they can't come right out and say, you must today, everybody. These things will take a little time. The rapidness in which CMMC went from nothing to where it is today in that 3 to 5 years, like it's here. It's not going away. So if you're a defense or any of that, that's not even a problem. But the rest of the 98% of the businesses that MSPs support, state by state, county by county, city by city, breach notifications, privacy laws, safe harbor rules, those things are coming out every single day, all the time. GDPR, if you're talking globally, Canada just, put their version of CMMC. So the point is, where are we going to be in the next 3 to 5 years? Listen, it ain't going away. Unfortunately, there's too many standards, but maybe there'll be some consolidation around there. But if you as an MSP are not already starting to get your own house in order and be thinking about this, I guarantee the other MSP down the street is. If you don't start to build that differentiator in your MSP, somebody else already is. You're seeing these stupid security questionnaires, these cyber liability insurance forms. You're starting to see that. I bet you've probably seen that for the last several years. And as your customers fall into this stuff, they're either going to ask you and you're going to be able to do it, or they're going to find someone else. So if you haven't already started to do this work in your own MSP and start to build the vernacular and the understanding and the policies and the documentation and getting your own stuff in order, you may already be behind. Where do I see this personally in the next 3 to 5 years? I was talking to, we run a peer group. I think you all know that. I have a peer group once a week, blah, blah, blah. I was talking to the peer group yesterday. So in the last 20 years, I have seen the IT industry go from living at home, fixing my family's computer, building a break fix business, moving that into managed IT services, and doing IT operations really, really well. What we haven't been doing is security operations really well. COVID threw a big monkey wrench in that. We know how to deal with RMM and PSAs and scanning and thingies and tools. We can do those tickets and those printers and building machines. We can do those IT operations really, really well. As we progress in the space, specifically in compliance, having those security and compliance operations are going to go hand in hand and fist and being, like I like to say, peanut butter to jelly. And if you are not starting to build your own internal culture around security, around compliance, around regulations. You don't need to know the encyclopedia. You need to know that it exists. You need to know how to find and partner with the right organizations to help you, because it's here, my friends. And the next 3 to 5 years is going to be a bumpy ride. But you can be a pioneer in that. You can start to do that today by getting your own house in order, by moving your own house, down a security and compliance operations path, by having good documentation, good policies and procedures, good assessment frameworks, working better together with Compliance Scorecard and Hudu, by bridging that gap between security operations and IT operations. All right, I'm off my soapbox. So we're coming down to the last 6 to 8 minutes here. I kept asking the audience for questions, and the only one that actually gave us something was Rick, and we already addressed that in the beginning. So if you do have any questions, pop them in there. We probably won't answer them because we're going to run out of time. But as I like to do these sessions, I like to make sure we all have one key takeaway as a group, so that you as an MSP have something actionable to take away out of today's session. I'm going to start with Daniel. I'm going to put him on the spot and pull him up. Daniel, one key takeaway, my friend.
Yeah, no, thanks, Tim. Love being put on the spot here. That's my thing. So, I think that my biggest key takeaway, being with you two who are so kind of knowledgeable in the industry, and compliance is your job. And, me being kind of a different role in my company, I think that my big takeaway was just the importance of compliance for all employees, from the top to the very bottom, because it really only takes one person to not be compliant. And, that can set down a really kind of negative chain of events for the company that they're a part of. And so I think, that being said, the kind of benefit of this, or kind of what you need to do to avoid this happening, is fostering that culture of compliance. And of course, documentation as well, like you both mentioned, and documenting your compliance procedures and your processes for being compliant, really to avoid things like that happening, and making sure that from top to the bottom of your organization, you have full compliance throughout the entire company. And that would probably be my biggest takeaway from today. So thank you both for kind of touching on everything. It was great to hear from both of you today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Daniel. All right, Ken, key takeaway. Ready? 3, 2, 1, go.
I guess my big takeaway is just understanding the importance of documentation and compliance. Your documentation is it enables you to manage compliance at scale, which is very important for MSPs. Your documentation is almost like your playbook. It allows you, if I'm a football coach, I have 11 players on the field, and I need to know, in order to defend our end zone, our defense, we need to understand, I need to know where our gaps are. I need to know the actions that everybody needs to take for us to sufficiently defend our end zone and keep our opponents from scoring. And it's the same thing with security and compliance. You need your game plan, you need your playbook, and you need your processes. You need to know where each individual role on your team that's supporting, defending your enterprise. So I just think, that all starts with documentation. It allows you to operate securely, efficiently, and it allows you to prove that to potential customers and regulatory bodies as well.
Have you been reading our website?
Just a
So we talk a lot here at Compliance Scorecard about using football analogies and sports analogies. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he read my website, because we talk about defending the end zone and, scoring the touchdown. And I actually like to use the word compliance is the security referee that has the playbook and can throw the flags when there's a foul.
That's good.
See, analogies, anecdotes, stories, right? Ken, you were going on and on and on about the football stuff. I'm like, oh my God, you looked at my website. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't, but it's that point of relatability as an MSP and bringing that conversation to your customer. All right, I guess it's my turn. So if I had to think of a key takeaway, and I had to think of, where can I start as an MSP? How can I start to build that culture? How can I start to, be able to bring forward this concept of documentation, this concept of standard operating procedures, all of this stuff? The first thing that I always say is have a champion. Have that person. Give that person the authority, give that person the ability, give that person the time to do the work. As I said earlier, it doesn't have to be your level 7 million technician, super smart PhD, whatever person. Some of those attributes are like good project management skills, maybe some negotiation skills. Heck, now with the days with all the GPTs that are out there, they probably don't need to be, an English major. Me, the highly dyslexic guy writing for 20 years has been a challenge. You guys got it easy with the GPTs this day. So the biggest key takeaway that I can leave you with as an MSP, and I know I sound like a broken record because I say it all the time, is have a champion, empower that champion, give them the tools and the time to do the work, to be held accountable, to hold others accountable, and to just start. Spend 1 hour once a week and write shit down. That's it. Doesn't have to be hard. I don't care what you do. Don't overthink it. Just start someplace and start now. And look at that. 3 minutes left. So I'm going to see if I can do it this way. Hold on. There. All right. We got all three of us here. I'm going to move over a little bit so I'm centered on the screen. Ken, Daniel, thank you so much for coming on today. Thanks for continuing to work together. Daniel, where do we go from here?
Yeah, no, Tim, thank you for this today. This was an awesome webinar. Now, so this is being obviously recorded on LinkedIn and everything like that. So people will be able to kind of access this at a future time if they weren't able to attend today. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it will live live on LinkedIn. Obviously, you guys will have the ability to do the file and slice and dice and all that fun stuff after the fact. But I just wanted to make sure I'm pointing out the right banner again. If you're all looking for, more information on Hudu, maybe starting a free trial, strongly encourage you to connect with Ken and Daniel on LinkedIn and being able to, jump in and see what they're doing. Who knows? Maybe there'll be an integration down the road where we are actually working better and playing better together.
Who knows? Maybe a little teaser in there, huh, Tim? No, I love that. So yeah, and just to reiterate, as Tim mentioned in the beginning, we're obviously both compliance companies and we both have compliance in our platforms, but very different ways in terms of the documentation within that compliance. For those of you that are joining us that maybe don't currently use Hudu or have never heard of Hudu, I'm always happy to provide you a one-on-one demo. So if you ever have any, questions or kind of are interested in seeing how Hudu's documentation can benefit you and your compliance, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll go ahead and leave my email in the comments section. And as Tim has graciously been showing on the banner there, you can start a free trial with us at our website, hudu.com as well. And that's all from me today. Tim, Ken, I'll go ahead and throw it back to you.
I suppose I should do my own shameless plug in the last 5 seconds. Hey, everybody, thank you so much for joining this live stream. Obviously, we want to be able to, have really great connections with partners like Ken and Daniel here. If you want to learn more about Compliance Scorecard, or if you haven't connected with me already and haven't found me, you probably haven't done your research. ComplianceScorecard.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. We will see all of you back on LinkedIn. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your weekend and happy spring.
Subscribe now.
All right.